I am Adriana, and I'm going to share with you how to have meaningful recreation and leisure in your life, and tips and tricks on how to cultivate your moments.
Hello, Jess, and welcome. I'm so excited to hear from you and have you on today. To get us started, just welcoming you, and I really want to get into it and get to know you a little bit more. So I'm wondering if you could introduce yourself.
Okay, sure. My name's Jess Jones, and I live in London, Ontario. I've been living here now for about 20 years. I am new-ish to the recreation field, but that would be professionally speaking. I've been practicing professionally for about 3 years now, but everything that I've ever done in my life has definitely amounted to recreation.
Mm-hmm.
And I often say that I just wish that I had known it was a career option way many years ago, so that I could have been doing it much sooner. But here we are. Yeah, so I live in London with my husband and two children. We have two daughters together, and I recently launched my own private practice, or I mean, it is a private practice, but it's a business in itself that I'm offering lots of different things and different services, and really pulling on my creativity, because that's really who I am and what I'm about. I love the arts and music, and yeah, all those things that are colorful and big and bright. So
That's awesome. I'm so interested in private practice. I'm wondering if you can explain who your services are tailored towards for private practice and really how you're offering that, especially in a COVID environment.
yeah, well, so this is like super fresh. I'd
Mm-hmm.
say it's been about 2 months now in the making, where, I launched the official title of like Jess Jones Recreation Therapy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, for like the last 3 years, I've been working in a director or coordinator position in recreation, serving our elderly who are living with dementia. So that's been my experiences in recreation specifically. So when I decided to launch my own business, I think for me, what I was really interested in was applying recreational therapy to all ages and abilities, because traditionally speaking, in my experience, rec therapy has always been in long-term care or retirement and or hospital settings. And I really wanted to start advocating for the rec therapist and really getting in the community and saying, we're not just for those settings. Yes, absolutely, we're very good in those settings, but rec therapy is a legitimate therapeutic service that can be used to help people of all ages and abilities. And so I think when, I took a moment to kind of sit down and think about it, that was one of my biggest goals, was how many people can I affect with this practice in a positive way. So, not limiting myself just to our elderly, whom I absolutely love.
Mm-hmm.
I'm probably, if anything, they're my most favorite people to be with. But I mean, there's children that need our support, and young adults and adults in general. And so that was really important to me when I was trying to figure out my target audience, which was like one of the number one questions I got asked when people heard I was opening a private practice. They said, "Oh, who's your audience? Like, who are you, doing this service with?" And I was like, everybody. And, I got the look like, everybody. And I'm like, yeah, everybody. I really want to have impact on the community. And that comes from an advocacy point of view, where I think our role is really crucial and important. And I can't wait to see that people can see that as we keep moving into the community from all different angles. So
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. And like kudos to you. That is so amazing. I feel like that's like my dream and aspiration. Um,
thank you.
you're welcome. I am currently in my practicum, and really having those thoughts of, yeah, like recreation therapy can be applied to all. How can we do this for our staff? And how can we do this in a more global aspect? But really, how can we apply our services to everyone? I know for me personally, I'm always trying to be my own rec therapist or my friends or family's rec therapist. So kudos to you for taking that initiative. And I have so many questions on how you did that. And yeah, I'll have to ask you more about that later.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. And yeah, you've lit a really big excitement in me, because me and my preceptor were just having a conversation today about how to start private practice, and really how to tailor our activities to everyone, and especially to the staff. So again, thank you for sharing that. Let's just jump right in. And what does meaningful recreation and leisure look like to you?
Yeah, that's a good question, because even before I knew about the professional aspect of recreational therapy, I always knew there was something about recreation in general that I gravitated towards, and that's the creative piece of it, the freedom piece of it, that it didn't matter who you were or what you chose to do. Recreation was always this big giant hug, right? Like, you know, and this is like completely before I understood that there were people practicing and helping people through recreation. So I'm speaking like, you know, when you used to hear the word recreation, like rec ball and recreation as just like a fun outing and something you did for fun. Though that's how I associated it with. And then as I like really started to gravitate it toward it more, and then learn that it was a profession, it really clicked for me, because recreation and leisure, it's for me practicing now and helping people see that. To me, that meaningful piece of it is the fuel, like me providing the fuel to people's fire. Because what I often notice, and this is even just among friends and family too, is that a lot of us don't realize that we have the capabilities to do anything we desire. And if I can be the spark that fuels, or the fuel that sparks the fire in people, that to me is meaningful rec and leisure. If I can see someone's eyes light up because I've introduced something that, or proven to them through an intervention or a modality that they're capable of doing something, oh, that to me is, that's it, right? That's the money. And it happens every day. And that's the beauty and the magic of therapeutic recreation, is that it's happening every single day, and every moment we hold space for. And you know, every morning I wake up with my children, and you know, and that's what I think I like about it, is that it's not a one-time thing like many traditional therapies, where you need to be in a moment, in a space to practice. You're practicing therapeutic recreation all the time. And why? Because it's those 6 pillars of wellness. We're holding space for rec therapy at every piece of, like, wherever we are and whatever we're doing, right? And I think for me, it was finally that haha moment when I said, oh my gosh, I can do something with people, that it doesn't matter what time and space or moment we're in, we can have a way to present it to people. Do you know what I mean? Like, there was no barrier in itself. Like, you know, it's not just mental health, or it was not just creative therapy. It's like physical and all those other things, social. So there was always a way to come about it. And that's the creativity of therapeutic recreation, for me anyway, is that you can come in at any angle and help people. And for me, that's so meaningful.
Yeah,
so
I completely agree. And thank you so much for sharing and having those beautiful nuggets of knowledge. And yeah, what I'm hearing echoing is also just that it's not just a one size fits all. And that's like one of my favorite parts about it is, like you said, like recreation is everywhere. And those different core concepts and fundamental pieces of that therapeutic communication and showing up for our clients whenever they are having a bad day, a good day, wherever they're at, we can show up and meet them and be able to adapt our activities and still, provide meaning in their life and support them on that journey. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Just hearing you say it back, it's like, oh yeah. Like you just know,
stuff,
like you're so into it because you're saying it. And I'm like, yeah, like that's it.
Yeah. Oh, I love having these discussions and hearing people's passion come out and seeing the passion on the screen. Thank you so much for sharing.
Instant smile. My cheeks will hurt because I'm so happy talking about it.
Awesome. So you've talked a lot about creativity and have shared that that's such a vital and key part of your own passion, and also just a key part of recreation therapy. So I'm wondering what creativity means to you, and if you can explain and debrief on that a bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what does it mean to me? So creativity to me is like the inventiveness, imagination, and innovation. So it's basically like all our ideas that we get every single day, and we get thousands of them. They come in by the second. And the creative piece of it is that we take those ideas and we turn them into a reality. And that, for me, that gets me very excited when I think about the raw building blocks of anything and thinking of how we can turn that into something new. That is probably one of the main things that gets me out of bed every day, is that it's a fresh canvas. Every single morning when we wake up, it's another day to create something new. And I just think that creativity can be used in so many ways, professionally and personally, to affect us positively and to affect the clients we're working with. To move us all forward,
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm taking it all in, and I hear you on that. While you're talking, like, I know that for me before, when I thought of creativity, I was like, oh, I'm not a creative person. Like, I can't draw or paint. I can take photos, but I'm not creative because I'm not doing those modalities. And I think, like you mentioned, it's really about those innovations and imagination. And I remember listening, it was years ago now, so I have no idea where it was from, but they were talking about science and creativity and how innovation and creative thinking, and not just creative arts, but, just being open-minded and seeing things from a different angle is truly creation and creativity as well.
Yeah, I mean, like, scientists are creative because at the end of the day, when you're taking ideas and turning them into reality, and you're experimenting and challenging yourself, that is creativity. When you can think outside of the box and try things differently, that's being creative. And you're right. I think, as a child or as children, we're taught how to be creative naturally because everything is new, and everything is about discovery and curiosity and trying things to see if they fit right. But then as we get older, everything becomes so much more rigid and black and white, and no, you need to do it this way and you need to do it that way. And we all of a sudden we think, well, I'm not a creative person. But you are, and we are, and we always have been, but society conditions us to believe that we're not, when in fact, good night. But yeah, we become conditioned to believe that we're not, when naturally I think humans are creative. We're very much that. And so I think that's another driving force with who I am and how I want to be perceived in the world of rec therapy, is because I want to, show people that they are creative and that they have that still inside of them. So it's really interesting.
Yeah, that rigidness and sometimes lack of freedom or lack of feeling of freedom is such a big role that comes as we grow older. I remember when I was younger, all I wanted was to be old. And now that I'm older, I'm like, oh, I missed out on all that creativity and open-mindedness where there was no judgment. And society
And no
definitely,
pressure, right? There
yeah.
was no pressure to have to conform a certain way, and no responsibility
Hmm.
or that feeling of having to do something because you have to do it. So my children often tell me like, "Oh, I can't wait until I'm older," which we both have done. And my husband and I are always reminding them like, don't rush being a child. And again, the same message my mom told me as a child, and now I see it as an adult. It's like, oh my gosh, like please don't rush, because once you're here, someone said to me like, you only spend so many years as a child, but you spend the rest of your life as an adult.
Hmm.
And when you put it in, when you take that perspective and you think about it, you're what, how many years are you actually a child? Maybe 10, 11, 12. Then that's when those pressures, those outside pressures start coming in to expect to behave a certain way, and to act a certain way. And so really, I mean, you got that decade to be free to do what you want. And I think you should continue doing what you want as you grow older. But yeah, you're
Yeah.
right.
Yeah,
Change.
a beautiful segue into the next conversation, really, of how can we bring creativity and thinking outside of the box kind of mentality in a recreation profession.
I think I think, at the end of the day, if we're coming to work curious, that's really going to be the natural leader with creativity. So, as long as we're showing up to whatever space we're holding for people, so if that's work or home or church or wherever we're going, if we're showing up curious and open-minded, and as listeners, I think it's important that we're always listening and practicing empathy and compassion and vulnerability. That's another big one. When we stay those things, it really leans into the best practice of creativity, I think, because you're not putting yourself in those boundaries that we're talking about, as children who don't have them, and then adults who do. I think as an adult, you need to be very mindful that it's easy to feel like you're not allowed to do certain things, and in fact you're allowed to do whatever you want. And so I think for creative people, or people who have troubles finding their creative self, I think the first piece is to just let go of those expectations that we have on ourselves and that people have put on us, and then move forward from there. So
Yeah, just being yourself, like in amongst
yeah,
yourself, your thoughts, your actions are all going to be different projections of yourself. And when you're talking about empathy and compassion and vulnerability, I really see how, I'm creative of my mindset of being vulnerable and being able to connect with my clients better by doing that. And really, yeah, when I'm thinking about creativity now, I'm thinking about like a huge picture of, say, if someone was given an art project or given an activity, everyone's going to do it differently and unique. And, by
that's right.
being ourselves, we're also being creative.
Yeah, and we're honoring, you know that God given gift of just being here, and that's regardless. I use the word God. That's regardless of whether anyone wants to use that word, but like
Mm-hmm.
the whole piece of us being here in this moment, when we can honor that, that's where the magic really starts. And that's, another big key piece to helping people is giving them that little nugget of inspiration, is that you can be exactly who you are, and really supporting people in that journey, because a lot of people have lost themselves, and we can help get that back for them.
Mm-hmm. By being our authentic self, for sure.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
And then I guess we've kind of started drifting this way, anyways, but past recreation professionals, how can we, develop this creativity and open mindedness in our general life and outside of our profession, even?
Yeah, again, staying curious. I think uh practice has to happen all the time. I don't think there's ever a time that we're off per se. I think, we're always in that role, from the minute we wake up in the morning to how we present ourselves to our family, to who we are by ourselves in those intimate moments. I think it all matters. And when we're conscientious of who we want to be and how we want to be, I think that really plays a role. And so keeping a journal, I think, is really helpful. If this is something new for people, or people who are, just kind of entering this new idea, or they're having this big shift of thinking for the first time, it can be scary. It can be really intimidating to think, oh my gosh, like, she wants me to be creative. She wants me to like be myself and be authentic. And I think when the parts that matter the most is who we are when no one's around, if that makes sense. I'm jumping all over right now, but I'm trying to think. At the end of the day, I used to say I have these really deep conversations with my friends, and these conversations come up often, like, oh, how do we stay creative, and how do we stay curious, and how do we do things authentically without worrying about what people are always thinking of us, and how to do our job properly. And there's so much judgment everywhere we go. And even as therapists, people are constantly judging the way we approach interventions and how we choose the interventions we choose. And I think, and I've said this before to the people around me, at the end of the day, if you can look at yourself in the mirror and be truly happy about everything you've said and done, and practice that day, that's all that matters.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I think just finding peace within ourselves is really going to help us show up to work, show up wherever we need to be, and just be conscientious of it. I really think the acknowledgement piece is huge, right?
Yeah, and journaling and having that reflection at the end of the day of, even though things may have gone awry and some things may not have worked out the way they had intended to, it's okay. And I did my best, and I was as authentic that I could be in that moment.
Yeah. And you said it too, like the reflection. I'm a huge reflective practice woman. I love it. I love reflection. And I've been in leadership now for, I'm thinking, going in my 5th or 6th year of being in management, or what I like to say, leadership. And that's a big thing with my teams and I, is sitting down at the end of the day, or at certain parts of the week, and really sitting down and asking those important questions, like, how are we feeling? Does it feel good? Is it working? Is it not working? What can we do to better support one another? That's huge, right? Because another part of being creative, feeling supported,
Mm-hmm.
and feeling honored and feeling loved. Because I'll tell you, even from someone, I live in a very safe space, and I'm very, very lucky to be in a safe space. But if anything like happens that upsets me, it's difficult to produce creativity in the way that I normally would, if you know what I'm saying? So if you think about that on a therapeutic recreation level, the people that we're often with are feeling like that all the time. They have those barriers in place all the time. So again, coming from a place of like that compassion and empathetic stance, when we practice self-reflection and we practice the reflection, we can understand better.
How can we show up and be creative if we aren't supported, or we don't have the correct environmental infrastructure?
That's it.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it comes from a place of love. And when we lead with love, we produce people who are showing up to work with love. At the end of the day, you can tell if you've led with love or you haven't.
Mm-hmm.
That's just instinctual. Like, if inside your stomach, at the end of the day, if you say, "Did you lead with love today?" You'll know, no, I did not. Like, you just know that you didn't. And I think that's such a great compass. That's such a good way to measure if we're doing the work we should be doing well.
Mm-hmm.
The work we're doing is being done well, Yeah.
something that's coming up that is a big topic and plays very heavily into this is if we aren't showing up with love, normalizing apologies. Because I feel like sometimes apologies are just like, it's like pulling a tooth. Like no one wants to apologize, but if we're not showing up at our best, really being able to apologize to our family, our partners, our coworkers, our clients, and saying, hey, I had a really rough day yesterday. And I know I didn't show up the way I wanted to, and I apologize for that. And I'm going to try better today. But I just want to acknowledge that.
Yeah. And that's another thing, right? Is communication. Like what you're saying is such a part of all these factors that really make who we can be at our best. I mean, communication is so important. And if we can be honest with ourselves, we'll in turn be honest with the people we're with, right? And then I think that energy really, it's very contagious. And so, your teammates or your family, it'll start to rub off on them. If you're showing up, like one thing I like, so rephrasing things. So I read something incredible a few years ago and I started practicing it. And now I'm seeing people like they're reposting and sharing what I read years ago. And I'm thinking, yay, it's catching. But it's like, instead of showing up and saying, I'm sorry, I'm late, you show up and you say, thank you for waiting for me. So like when you take that minute to just rephrase it so that it's not about, that you're sorry for doing something that you shouldn't have done. It's thanking that person for holding space for you. And that's what we're saying is coming into a space that's being held with support. And it's incredible when you can like really have that shift in thinking, how something so dramatically can change.
Yeah.
Just the way we perceive ourselves can change.
That creative mindset. And instead of being negative with yourself and, saying, oh, I'm sorry, I did all these things wrong, really having that and appreciating that person for, still accepting you. And yeah, I completely agree that there's that ripple effect when you do it, when you're able to be vulnerable and relatable with your client, of course, in a professional way, you can really see that coming out in the clients of them being able to, oh, like we're allowed to be ourselves here. Then I can be myself too, which is so amazing to see.
Yeah, I think that's, naturally, I'm a very eccentric, wild person, in person. My rec therapy has been noticed in practice because of how bizarre and crazy I am. I'm not quiet. And so I'm often heard wherever I am in the building. And I think at the end of the day, the shyest people end up opening up for me because they see that I hold no judgment on myself, and I laugh loud and I act crazy and I allow myself to be me, and it's okay. And I think once, maybe it's not maybe the very first session we have, but maybe the second or third, where I start to see them open up a little more because they're like, oh my gosh, she's so crazy. And uses the space. And I think encouraging people to take up space, that's another really big piece of being creative. It's like, yes, I want you to do this. Yes, you're here. Thank you. I was waiting for you. I want you here. I want to see you. And I want you to be big. I want you to hold a lot of space, because I often hear with clients, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that. Or, maybe I shouldn't be doing that. But you're so kind. And I said, yeah, okay, but I want you here, and I want to hear what you have to say, and I want you to be loud, and I want you to be big. And then they laugh a little bit and they're like, you're crazy. And I'm like, no, but this is true. This is how we should show up. And then every time I see them, they're a little bigger. And I just think it's so beautiful to see them expand, because one day they're going to look in the mirror and they're going to see that expansion and be like, they're not going to be like, oh, thanks, Jess. Thanks, Jess.
All those goodies.
But they'll see the value and worth that they truly hold as individuals. And I think at the end of the day, for me, if I can make someone see their worth, my job's done. I've done a good job. So
something really interesting is coming up for me, probably because it's on the tip of my mind. So today at work, one of our programs was all about I am statements. And in this, it sparked a really interesting discussion about the value of having someone recognize and appreciate your values and your strengths. So in this activity, we had a I am in the middle, and then we were writing I am statements. And some of the ones that people held closest to their hearts was positive things others had said about them. And I think it's so important, not just in recreation, but just in life in general. If someone's doing a great job, to really meet them and say like, wow, I see you're doing that, and I think it's amazing. And I just want to spend this time to really appreciate you for who you are and your strengths. And I think that's a beautiful part of recreation in general, and just in helping professions and helping individuals, really, is being empathetic and being able to give that kind affirmation to them.
Have you ever done it in public? So I say that because what you're saying it's so true. And I remember some place we were doing a similar activity, and someone said, I challenge you to give 5 compliments to people you have no clue who they are. So it's easy to go into work and do the challenge, because you could see you and be like, oh, hi, Adriana, you look beautiful in your brown shirt. And you'll be like, oh, thank you. Or, oh, I love the way you do this. And it's easy for us because it's that sense of comfort. We've got comfort around us. But someone challenged me once to go out into the public, wherever I was, and do it. And it's really scary. And you know what it is? I realized it's because there's that fear of rejection. Even though you're the one that's going to give the compliment, you're worried that they're going to turn around and be like, excuse me? Why are you talking to me? And so anyways, I tried it. I worked up the courage, and I remember where I was going through the vestibule. So these double doors to drop my child off to daycare. So this is a few years ago now, because both my children are no longer in childcare. And I remember this woman walked out, and she had the most beautiful yellow bolero pants on. They were just stunning. They swayed in the wind perfectly, and the way they fit her waist. Oh my gosh, she was gorgeous. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, it was fresh that I was supposed to do this activity. And I was like, oh, and I thought, this is my moment. I can tell this woman. And I did it. I just turned around and I said, excuse me, your pants, they're beautiful. I love them. You look great. And she turned around, she said, thank you. I have had such a shitty morning. And to hear that, thank you. And she just walked away with the biggest smile. And then that lesson right there just summed up everything that teacher or mentor was trying to teach me in that moment. It was like, you don't know who you're sharing space with at any given moment. And you don't know who needs to hear those words of kindness. And I thought in my own head, in my own negative biases, that I was going to say something and she was going to turn around and be like, excuse me, you don't know me, why are you talking to me, right? And in turn, it turns out that she needed those words. She's this beautiful woman who I would never have thought in 1,000 years needed to hear a compliment. And yet in that moment, she really needed to hear that, especially from someone she didn't know. And so that for me was a huge lesson that played out for many years. In fact, I'm telling you the story, so clearly it still resonates with me. And I think when we can really just be present, that's where creativity flourishes. And that's flow, right? Yeah. There it is. I mean, when you're in the moment and you're being truly who you are. Oh, I got goosebumps doing this. That's the money. That's it, right?
Yeah, so. I completely agree. Those random acts of kindness can make someone's day, week, and month and year, and we may not even know it. And really good reflection points on saying how you had no idea how that person had an awful day, and that just shifted their mindset. And I had a really good reflective paper just recently that I had to write about. And that's one thing that I wrote about, of being empathetic and pushing that one step further, because you truly have no idea, even if it's a coworker, your closest friend, if they are going through something really challenging, you don't know what internal dialogue they're dealing with. And those positive random acts of kindness can truly make their day and make them feel so much better.
And I think too, the cool part of all of that is that I had a small child, my daughter, who was watching the whole thing. And so, you know, I'm practicing something new that's out of my comfort level, but I had just taught one of the most powerful lessons to my daughter, that I was giving a compliment to another woman that I didn't know her, because I remember the question afterwards was like, do you know her? And I was like, no. She's like, oh, okay. And it was that learning opportunity, that teaching opportunity to say, well, why do we need to know people to talk to them and give them compliments, right? And so, yeah, and like we've continued practicing it in my household. And now it's incredible because my 8-year-old will just be walking down the street and she doesn't even know the child walking by her, but she'll be like, oh, I like your bow. And the girl will stop in her tracks and be like, oh my gosh, thank you. Like, and it's just these credible moments, you know, what we were saying, like those meaningful connections. Oh, I mean, that's all it is. It's just being present and being there and really savoring the moment.
Yeah. And I think having these ripple effects in our lives and having these conversations about these ripple effects that we've had is only just going to make a larger wake and impact more people. And so if it's us and we're doing the best we can and showing those random acts of kindness to strangers around us or our clients or our friends, then they're going to start doing that to others because they're going to see that role models. And our kids are going to start doing that. And just a huge ripple effect of empathy and being present, which is awesome and definitely needed in this world.
Yeah, that's it too, right? I always tell my girls, I say, if someone is being cruel or mean or judgmental with you, the first thing to do is to not be judgmental back, not to think the worst in that person. Because, you know, growing up for me, if someone was mean or catty or rude, it was just easy to label them and be like, oh, like they're this or they're that, right? But one thing that I have really strived to tell my children is that use that opportunity to reflect on where they are, because most times it's got nothing to do with who we are. It's a reflection of what they're dealing with in their lives. And if we can be supportive and ask the right questions, we in turn usually end up becoming their friend. So, and that usually like stops people in their tracks. If you walk up to someone who's been really mean to you and say, you know what, I hear you, and you validate whatever it is that they're angry or they're shouting at you about. And then all you say is, what can I do to help you? Or what is there something I can do to help? That usually like confuses people. And they're like, wait, I just got really angry with you for no reason, but you want to help me. And I think that's a starting point that everyone should really think about, you know, that it's not about us. It's not, and it's easy for us to just, again, that negative bias. We always assume if somebody's being rude to us, it's our problem, but it's not. It's usually their problem. And then we can take that and say, well, how can I use my empathy and compassion to help them instead of just further escalate the judgment? Because it's easy to just be judgmental back, right?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
that takes creativity. It takes creativity, and patience and love to say, I know you're hurting inside, so I'm actually going to be here for you and listen instead of shout names back.
Yeah. I love how this conversation has developed into a huge conversation about creative thinking and challenging either previous learned thoughts or societal stigmas or reinforcements in society. And yeah, I think creative thought just goes to show that one, every single person is creative. Two, there are so many ways outside of recreation and leisure that we can show up creatively, and how we can truly think outside of the box that society may have put us in, and think outside of it and be creative with the way we show up in the world and how we really hold space for people and show up with that empathy and compassion and vulnerability.
I love it.
Yeah. So bringing it back, even though that was a beautiful conversation and so many
it really was
knowledge, what are some creative activities in recreation that we can do? We talked in depthly about creative thinking, which I love, but yeah, bringing it in, roping it back in,
Yeah, of course.
different activities. But yeah, I loved our discussion, and I'm glad that it sparked.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so some really great activities to try out. So if you're doing, for me, I find like one-to-one programming it's really, I think it's easier to introduce creativity because there's less of that judgment and less of that self awareness that we so often go into groups. I've been in lots of group settings where I think, oh my gosh, if the professor asks me to speak out loud right now, I'm going to panic, right? You start sweating and you start freaking out. And I can only imagine how that might feel for anybody coming to group work for the first time, thinking, I don't know anybody. So it's harder. It's much more challenging to invoke creativity in a group until you've built trust. And so I think like a lot of the times that's basically the foremost important thing is building trust and building relationships. And once you've built those relationships, that's really where the creativity in group work or in a larger facilitation can really take place. But one of the things I do like are icebreakers. I try to steer away from the cheesy old school ones, and I try to use my creative thinking to have fun with them in different ways and new ways of doing them. But one thing I like to do is give everybody, I wrote it down, 30 circles in 3 minutes. So if anybody, that's okay. If anybody wants to try this, who's listening, you give your participants, a piece of paper that has 30 circles, and you set the timer and you give them 3 minutes to put whatever they want in those circles. And I think it's a really great way to get the blood flowing through the brain and get us thinking how to organically find what it is that sparks creativity in each of us. Because like you said earlier, we're all going to come to the table and present or express differently. And that's why I love expressive arts, because it doesn't matter who that person is. 5 people can draw a bird and that bird will look different. Mm-hmm. And I think that's so beautiful. And so this activity, this exercise is a really great way to demonstrate that we can all have some really progressive ideas and share ideas on different levels, but all from different spaces and different places. So that's a really cool activity.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. And it really goes to show just like creative thinking and also just unique perspectives that all of us have. In those 30 seconds, I can imagine there's so many different topics that come up. And yeah, I think icebreakers are great. You mentioned, building trust and respect with that participant and that client. And I think icebreakers are a great way to do this in a group setting, whereas they can build empathy because they're hearing each other's responses and can build those connections, whether the other person knows it or not. It can just really normalize and humanize and build similar interests and knowledge bases.
Yeah, absolutely.
To kind of build on this rapport, this topic of creativity and activities, you said expressive arts. So I know this is a big thing of creating our being creative, I guess. So thinking about arts and writing and music creation and self-expression. And like we said, creative thinking. And I love our conversation on that and how that really truly sparks. Now that we've talked about, creative thinking and creative activities, what are some benefits that can be had from, thinking in a creative way and also showing up in a creative way, as well as just doing creative activities for ourselves?
Yeah, there are so many benefits. Creativity naturally improves mood, 100%. So I'll tell you a little story, and I'll make sure that we don't segue off too much. But back in 2018, my daughter was 5 at the time. She's 8 now. She was diagnosed with leukemia, and that's earth-shattering. I mean, that changed all our lives in a big way. but it was that moment where I pivoted in and leaned into my creativity, because every time I picked up a paintbrush and every time I just allowed myself to sit down and be quiet and not think about the things that I was being challenged to think about all the time, my mood and the way I felt always improved. And I'm not a scientist, so I don't have like hard, concrete research to hand over to you. But I mean, like, you can just instantly feel like you put music on. What do we do when we're feeling sad? We put music on to make us feel better. When we're trying to sleep, we put on soft music to make us feel, comforted. I mean, it's such a, I did a really cool paper for one of my anatomy classes, and it was all about how we use creativity to activate the frontal lobes and what systems are at play when we're being creative. And so I was specifically speaking about music, but just how it actually affects our central nervous systems, our cognitive, the neuroplasticity in our brains and the frontal lobes, and how we're constantly making those connections, and that they're happening all the time. And when we are actually participating in creative processes, that it's improving and helping us in such huge ways that we don't even realize, right? But then creativity helps self-esteem. Like we've just had a 45-minute talk about, showing up and how that can support us in being our authentic selves. So I think that's a big one to think about. And our social life. I mean, creativity is art imitates life. And so I really think that when we're creative individuals and we honor our creativity, we show up in our social life with more meaningful connections and authenticity.
I appreciate you sharing about your daughter and how you've been able to express yourself. And when you're sharing that and explaining how you were able to, express your feelings, I feel like creativity in amongst creative writing, creative thinking, really just allows us to feel and express ourselves in that feeling, whether it be socially that we're expressing ourselves and that is how we're showing up and how we're connecting, or how we're expressing ourselves and feeling in amongst ourselves. Yeah, I think definitely how it makes us feel. And, I have some research that I'll link below, but not only does creativity allow us positive feedback right away and immediately, but it also has a long-term effect, like you said, on cognition, on our physical abilities. There are so many different layers to creativity. And when you think about creative thinking, then it just adds so many more benefits to it, because that's opening up your mind, allowing you to build that neuroplasticity and so much more, and confidence. I could list probably 200 different terms that it could build.
Yeah, I know. I was just about to say, I think so. One of the things that I'm really advocating or speaking about a lot lately is resilience. And I'm often, labeled resilient, my whole life. I have lots of stories I can share that lean into resiliency. And so I'm really starting to talk more about it, because after being told, oh, you're so resilient 1,000 times, you really start to wonder, what is resilience? Like, what is it that I'm doing that's resilient? And one of the things I've really noticed is that connection between creativity and resilience. And I think because when we're creative, it helps us to become better problem solvers. And it helps us in all areas of our life. And so we can deal better with any situation when we come from a background of creativity. So yeah, it's one of the things that I'm actually like studying, I guess, doing much more research on, like, what it is that gives us grit. Where does grit come from? So it's interesting stuff.
Yeah, and I think segueing this to the next topic, that grit, that vulnerability, that creativity, bringing it to leadership. And you said that you've had lots of experience in leadership roles. and being able to be creative, be our authentic self, and think outside of the box. How can we show up as leaders and do that? And how does that affect others when they have that creative leader that allows them to show up as themselves as well?
Yeah, well, I guess traditionally my leadership style is very laissez-faire because if I've got a team, the first thing I want to do is share trust in them that they're going to do the job that they were hired to do. And I think when you allow people to move the way they naturally move and think the way they naturally think, you're honoring their creativity. And being a creative leader is an asset for any company because we're constantly looking at different angles and different ways of approaching situations. Like I say, I like lifting the rug. I like looking at all the nooks and crannies. I mean, COVID is such a perfect example as a rec therapist, how we've all had to lift the rug and look in all the nooks and crannies for how to present programs and offer programming to people with nothing. I mean, we have been building something from nothing for almost 2 years now. And so, I mean, creativity has been, if you hadn't been a creative rec therapist a year and a half ago, you certainly probably are now. And so when you show up in a leadership role creatively, it's really coming back to, I mean, everything we've talked about tonight, you know, honoring people for who they are and allowing people to be authentic. And you're going to get really hardworking people because they're truly being honored for who they are and what they were hired to do. It's when you start putting people in boxes and micromanaging and not trusting that you don't build those relationships, right? And so whenever I'm leading a team, that's basically the first thing I say is this is, all of us are in this together. And I'm very transparent. I've always been a transparent leader because that to me is so important, that we're sharing and allowing them to see that we're human. You know, I'm not going to come to work and be robotic. I mean, I wear my heart on my sleeve, and some people will disagree that that's a good thing, but I can't change. It's who I am. And so, but, you know, and creative people are very resourceful. I think that's our number one asset is that, you know, I am really resourceful. I can find things, you know, I'm not afraid to look for things and find ways to solve problems. So, yeah.
Yeah, I can hear and echo all the things you're saying, and really seeing each other's strengths and allowing ourselves to be our authentic selves. And like we've had this conversation of really just leading with your passion and talking about how that has influenced you and your practice, really allowing someone to show up and be their authentic self and lead with their passion really just allows them to continue loving and finding fulfillment in work, and definitely resourcefulness. You share how you wear your heart on your sleeve, and I do as well. And I remember feeling like vulnerability was a weakness for so long, and it was pressured and was told that it was a weakness and I was weak. But I truly think being able to be our authentic selves and being able to show up and be vulnerable is such an asset and really helps us, one, lead, and two, just humanize the factors of leadership. I know for myself, I'm very new in the field, and this past year, I have mentored a few people in the recreation therapy assistant role. And so often they're like, wow, you really stepped into this role. You're doing so great. You're doing all these amazing things. And I was like, let me give you a reality check. When I was in your place, I couldn't do this. You are doing so amazing. And I'm the first person to throw myself under the bus and say, hey, I'm not perfect. And with my clients too, like, yes, I've done a lot of self-work, but I am always growing. And regardless of where we are, we never should stop growing. We should always be able to have that reflection and be able to see where we can grow. I know
Mm-hmm.
I'm a perfectionist, and I remember getting a good grade, but not a desired grade on one of my assignments. And I was telling my dad this and saying how, oh, it so sucks. And he was like, well, if you get 100%, what are you going to do? Where are you going to grow? And I was like, that is completely correct. Like, how can I reflect on what I need to change and better in myself if I have stopped growing? And we are never going to stop growing. There's always something that's going to throw us a curveball, or just life happens. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, and it's true. You're 100% right, because I remember saying to my therapist, so I have a therapist because I think it's important to talk, and that growth mindset, that positive growth mindset, so important. And I said to her, I got 97 on my exam. She was like, that's amazing. I said, yeah, but I was like 3% off from perfect. And she said, so there's that negative bias that we all hold for ourselves, right? Like, why couldn't I have just got that extra 3%? Because biologically, we're wired to look at the negative, because that's where the trouble is. That's where the problems lie, right? So how can we fix those things instead of just being happy that it was 97? Here I am going, oh, what question did I get wrong? But I love everything you're saying, and it's true. And I had to Google really quickly a quote that you reminded me of that has stuck with me. It's such a good quote. So I'm going to read it, but it's an Albert Einstein. I'm sure you've heard it, but it's, everybody's a genius. But if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it's stupid. And so, like, that's exactly what we're talking about, is really enabling and supporting those people who are all gifted, and we're all creative, and we're all able to provide in a different way. And it's so sad that most often we've been told to be quiet, or stop that, or don't do that, and then we go around thinking we can't do something, or we're not able to do it, but that's not true at all.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that quote, and I've definitely seen it and lived by it for so long, because for me, I am so bad at math. And if you told me that I had to be a mathematician, I would live my life miserable. I would not, yeah, very miserable. And I wouldn't have any satisfaction in life. And so in our careers, in what we do in life, who we hang out with, if we are getting that support, and if we are finding meaning in recreation, in our work, then we're truly being able to be our authentic self, because we're not feeling pressured into, being that fish who has to climb the tree and doing the impossible. We talked a little bit about, connection and friendships, and how we can take a creative lens in looking at those. And I'm wondering if you have found any value in connections, or strength in connections since COVID started, and just in general in life. And I know we've echoed this a lot of empathy and compassion and vulnerability, but just wondering if you have any insights or personal stories to share of, how COVID has really shaped and strengthened your connections with either your clients or friends or family or colleagues.
Well, the one thing that, I think for me that has become true through all of this is that support for the professional needs to happen more. And this is something that I'm just starting to kind of climb into. It's kind of messy and dirty, because nobody really wants to hear about people not being supported in the workplace. And so I've found working as a rec therapist during COVID has been especially challenging, because we're often the ones that are the cheerleaders and the supporters to others. And I found it really hard this past year and a half to keep coming to work with that positive face when I was struggling so much inside. from lack of support. You know, a lot of the recreation that I am in my experiences, the whole program comes from third parties and contractors. So, you know, our entire programming, our budget is made up of, you know, volunteers and entertainers and music therapists and art therapists that come in and swell the program to look beautiful. And COVID really underlined a lot of issues that we have in our society right now. But one of the things it also highlighted was that it took away all those things from us. And then we were just left with the bare bones of the director, or, you know, the coordinator, or whomever you're calling yourself, activity specialist, and their assistant. And that job can't be done with just those people. And so it was very evident that we were being unsupported. And I think that really challenged me mentally and physically. It was the first time, I mean, I've experienced burnout before in my life, but it was the first time where I'd experienced compassionate burnout, and having to be vocal in the workplace about my own mental health. And so, if anything that I've been taught is that there needs to be more support for the caregiver. And so that's been another piece of my advocacy in starting my business and getting into the community as a private practitioner, is how can I support the caregiver in any situation? We often ideally think of the client as who needs our help the most. But in my personal experience with my daughter, she's very well taken care of. It's often the parents or the people or I was gonna say the lovers, the caregivers, but the people who are loving and caring for that are getting forgotten about. And so I think that COVID really highlighted that for me, and that just made meaningful connections that much more important, to make sure that I was reaching out to those people and saying, listen, I know you're exhausted. I know you're tired, but together we can do this. Because I didn't feel that. Yeah. So, you know, I felt it not so much with my daughter's experience. I'm referring now to like the rec therapist role. I didn't feel that in the last year and a half. It was like, you're constantly go, 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 faster, faster, get it done, get it done. And it's like, but I can't keep up. I'm tired. Yeah. So
I appreciate you sharing that. And I think, and I hope that, you know, this podcast and just in general in life, that we can start to be more open about having burnout and having compassion fatigue, and it to be our strength in self-awareness rather than noticed as a weakness. Because
that's right.
Without having that support, everyone's going to have burnout and everyone's going to have compassion fatigue. So instead of saying that the person's failed, really looking at it in a systematic way of what did we do to fail you? And I think this is something that I think educators should do, instead of saying, oh, you failed, like, what's wrong with you? Or, oh, you plagiarized, what's wrong with you? Instead, taking a step back and saying, what did I do to not support you? And how can I support you?
Yeah, taking responsibility.
Yeah, right? Exactly.
Everybody, the big corporations, the big businesses, the ones that have lots of staff, they need to take more responsibility for caring for the people that are on the front lines.
Yeah, and I think recreation therapy often gets the short end of the stick because we're the new profession. And so we not only have to advocate for ourselves, but we have to advocate for our services. And so we're not going to tell a nurse, oh, you're putting the needle in wrong, but our programs are always so finitely criticized, and so much feedback is given to us, even though we're the ones who are helping support and fostering those therapeutic relationships. We're often, I find, the most heavily criticized and have to advocate so much for our services. And that's a strong leader to burnout as is. So moving forward, I really want to talk about compassion fatigue and burnout, because even just being in the field for 10 months, I experienced it. I mean, I was also working and in school, so that just added some layers. But
Mm-hmm.
really being able to open up and have that vulnerability with our leadership teams and even with our clients. Like, why do we have to break these professional boundaries of just being human and being able to, explain, like, you know what, today I can't like show up super happy. I can't be my most vibrant self. And it sucks, and it's it's something that if you're not showing up like that, you really take it home. And I know we talked about this previously about, being able to be our best selves and being able to reflect and also being able to recharge. Like,
Mm-hmm.
we are such helping professions and we
Mm-hmm.
need to fill our cup too. And I think compassion fatigue and burnout is such a prevalent thing since COVID's happened, and just really in the past few years, and long before that, I'm sure.
Yeah,
It's just more talked
absolutely.
about now. Yeah.
Yeah, I think leaders just need to ask people, their team, more like the simple question of what do you need? What
Hmm.
can I do? Because that's often the only question we need to be asked. We have an answer.
Yeah. I guess my question for you is, what ways do you think you could be supported, or do you wish management or just leadership roles can really encourage and foster the safe space to have support and really be vulnerable in sharing what you're going through, and not taking on and only being the yes person, but also building those professional boundaries? How do you think, as leaders, we can promote that and make that a safe place to do so?
Yeah, I think in large company structures, I think it has to come from the top. I think recreation needs to be prioritized as a department that's funded um, from the inside out, not from the outside in. Because I think when you have the proper amount of staff running programming and you have the positions in place for the proper roles, that's where you're going to be able to support your team the best way possible. It's when you start to say, well, you can't have these people because of this, and you can't have these people, and oh, sorry, we're only staffed, or the staffing model is only, you know, you as a director who's also on the floor and one part-time person, and you have 160 residents or clients. I mean, do the math. That's just not going to work. And I don't know who's doing the budget to really, if they've never, maybe they're not magician or mathematicians, right? Like we were saying, or maybe they're neglecting to look at the numbers, but it just doesn't work. So I really think it has to start from the inside and work outwards. And if we're going to, you know, everybody wants rec around, just like you said, everybody likes, you know, the play. Recreation is life. That is the life of the building. Nobody goes to a retirement home because of the nursing. I mean, I'm not saying that in any way to be rude. A
Yeah.
nursing is so important. It's the care aspect. We need that in there. I'm not, but from a marketing perspective, you often go to a place or a home for its recreational value, for the things that you're getting spiritually and physically and socially and emotionally.
Hmm.
And care is put into that, nursing's put into that. But if you're going to market from a recreational standpoint, then you need to put the money where your mouth is and actually invest in recreation,
Yeah.
and not just say, well, it's a very important piece to quality of life, but then not fund it and not support it, you know. And then people on the outside aren't seeing that, you know, like my residents, they don't know that. That's politics. That's the political piece that we don't tell people because that would be unprofessional. But between you and I, we both know at the end of the day there needs to be changes made.
Yeah. And going back to your nursing example, not to shine a negative light on them at all, but it's just essential. It's not
That's right.
more than that. It's there, and you already know it's there. Like, it's foundational. Like, you just,
That's right.
when you're going to a retirement home or you're going into care, you don't have to worry about nursing. It's already there. And
that's
so
what I'm saying.
Why?
Exactly.
Yeah. So why is recreation built up to this without having those supports? And yeah, if you want to have clients who are being heavily impacted and staff that are also getting that benefit from it, why is there no support there? And why is it so hard to advocate for more roles in recreation when we can see its value and we're promoting it? And also,
as a valuable. Yes.
Yeah.
And we're being told from the inside that we're valued. This is the thing, right? Like, and I think too, it seems minor, but I think overall it has a huge impact, is like the names in which we call ourselves. So recently I've become a resident artist to do art programming for the elderly in a home. And I'm very excited about that. And they're very intentional about calling their recreation therapist, and not rec aides or rec. And it's okay. I mean, if that's, and I'm not, that is no slander on anybody who chooses to use other names, but I think it's important, if we're going to advocate for our profession and for what we do and the benefits of therapeutic recreation, which there's evidence-based proof that the interventions are working, we need to honor those people and the education they've earned and the time they've spent to be qualified professionals and call them what they are. So it's all those small changes that make a huge impact on the industry and the profession in itself.
Yeah, it's that chain of support that any profession needs. It's like nursing. You wouldn't call nursing anything else. You wouldn't call a doctor anything else. No. So why are we getting a reduced value and less supported inherently because of it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So bringing it home and really wrapping it up with recreation therapy is so important, and being a new profession comes with a lot of challenges and a lot of advocacy that we have to do. I don't want to have anyone lean away from the profession, because as you can see from our previous conversation, it is such a vital and important and meaningful and purposeful profession, and just just a meaningful thing to have in life. I think of this shift in retirement when someone goes to work not 100%, but 50% of their time. That's where they're getting all their meaning. And then shifting to leisure, having to be meaningful. And I think if we build meaningful recreation into our life overall, that transition is going to be so much easier. And also we're going to be so much fulfilled throughout our life and not have to heavily rely on our profession.
Yeah.
So bringing it in, do you have any recommendations that you want to share with the audience about creativity, leadership, or connections?
Well, I'm a huge Brené Brown fan. I've read every single book she has. She's super foundational for me. And I have her podcast basically in my pocket. But yeah, she's been a game changer for me. Dare to Lead is definitely the book that I would recommend to anybody who's looking to make change in the workplace. She really challenges your thoughts on leadership when dealing with very work-related experiences and situations. So that's really good. Yeah, I don't know. I'm in a really weird space. And I don't mean weird. I'm just like in this very big transition in my life where I'm just kind of hovering above a lot of things and trying to figure out where I want to step down to and how I want to present the business. But yeah, my recommendation for sure is Brené Brown. She's awesome. She's down to earth. She's funny. She's cool. And she makes a lot of sense and talks a lot about everything we've talked about tonight. So
Exactly. I love her vulnerability, and just like, she's so human, and she cracks jokes and is so herself and so unshamefully herself, and I love her too. So I definitely recommend anything from Brene Brown too. I haven't read any of her books, even though I really want to, but I've listened to all of her podcasts.
yeah.
And speaking of your business and, your profession in the private practice world, so if anyone was interested in reaching out to you and learning more about you, where could they find you?
Yeah, so I'm on most social media platforms. I'm on Facebook, and I'm on Instagram, and I'm on LinkedIn. I don't really shine too much of a different personality on either platform. I'm basically the same wherever you find me. But then you can find me too at www.jessjonesrecreationtherapy.com. And that's kind of, I'm trying to build this site that will be a hub for people to come to and visit because they want to. Right now, for my own pleasure, and one day I hope will be for others, that I'm changing the site's theme because it's so recreational to do so. Every month, it will reflect the practices I'm teaching or practicing. So I offer these activation kits that I'm very excited about. I've labeled them ages 4 to 104. And they're for all ages and abilities, but this monthly subscription, so you can purchase the kit on its own, or you can subscribe and then you get the kit to your door every month. But it's a box filled with a sensory experience that's usually nature inspired. So I'm just moving into my second box, and it's June, we're celebrating lake life. So it's all things that are Canadian lakes, rivers, watersheds. And so when you subscribe to this kit, you also get a PDF workbook. And so my whole website right now is like lake themed, and it's blue. And like in May, it was a pink and flowery. So like, that's just me being super nerdy and being like, I'm changing my website to like reflect what I'm up to. But that, I think, as a rec therapist, people can appreciate.
Yeah,
So
it really shows your creativity.
right, come see what crazy things I'm up to. But essentially what I'm offering is I really want to be supportive to the rec therapist. And so throughout the next few months, I'm going to be writing lots of different articles and pieces of information for people to take. I have a resource page that is very Canadian based. So lots of Canadian links to help people. If you're a business and you're looking to be on my resource page, I invite you to contact me because I'd love to showcase new businesses or other rec therapists. I mean, we're all in this together. But what else is happening? Once the province opens back up, I'm going to be out in the community doing art programming. So I offer art programming that's Reggio Emilia inspired, and I get inside different homes. So retirement, long-term care, schools, private, workshop based. If you want to have a group of people and just do outdoor art programming, I do that. But yeah, it's basically me supporting you in a really creative way and finding your interests and, suiting you up with something that's going to help you find your passion. And so I really hope people will come and visit because I'm always probably behind the screen tinkering away.
That's awesome. And I can really, throughout this conversation and through your website and through your Instagram, I can see your passion of creativity. And I love how we took creativity to another level of creative thinking tonight. And in this discussion, I think it really opened my eyes to what creativity truly is. Because walking into this, I was thinking that we're going to talk about art and leisure and recreation. And I love, and this is such a nice little nugget of how entrenched recreation therapy truly is in psychology and just the way our minds think. Mm-hmm. So thank you so much. I'm excited to check out your website again and more of your resources and see what new to come. I have had such an amazing and awakening experience talking to you. So thank you so much for being on and really helping me open my mind and be more creative.
Thank you, Adriana. It was really great to sit down with you too.